Hey, how's it going? It's the other John Brown that looks like Devin Townsend you ordered from Wish.com, and today I want to do a little test. I want to find out if there's a sonic difference between front loading and rear loading a guitar cab, and if there's a difference, what that difference is. Is Wish.com even a thing still? Or is it all Temu now? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge one thing, and that is that Christian Kohle just made a video on this topic not too long ago, and I'm a big fan of the man and his channels, one of my favorite guitar-related channels on YouTube. And I haven't watched that video yet on purpose because I didn't want to be influenced or biased by it. So I may be coming to the same conclusions here. I don't know. I'm probably going to watch this video after I film this. But I want to use this Harley Benton G412 Plus next to me here that you may have seen in a few other of my videos now. I have a few guitar cabs which are mostly rear loading. I have a few front loading cabs and they do sound different, but I'm not sure if the side from which the speakers are loaded in really is the determining factor in the tonal difference, or if it's cab construction or the speakers, whatnot. You know, the difference between front loading and rear loading cabs has been a thing of debate on guitar forums for ages now. I'm not really sure. I want to find out what it is, and this Harley Benton cab is really predestined for that. For one thing, I thought it was front loading to begin with when I got it, because you can remove the front grille, and I'd only really experienced that on front loading cabs so far. So when I first got it, I tried to front load it and the speakers didn't fit, and I was about to shit on Harley Benton so hard in the video until a thought occurred to me while I was telling some friends about that. Maybe it's not a front loading cab at all. So I checked the description, checked the website, and front loading was mentioned nowhere at all. So almost made a fool of myself. I'm an educated moron. However, I had already started to make this cutout in the baffle larger so that I could safely fit the speakers from the front without actually warping, bending the frame when tightening down the speaker bowls. And that's why the wood is a little exposed here. And some of you guys in the last video I did with this cab kept commenting, oh, you need to put all 4 speakers in this cab because this to the grill looked like there was no speaker installed, but there was always 4 speakers installed. But I digress. Anyway, what I'm going to do is make all 4 speaker cutouts large enough so that I can load the speakers from the front as well, and then set up a few microphones, reamp a few riffs, and do some room EQ wizard measurements. I think I'm going to be putting a ribbon mic some distance from the cab, pointing at the center, a condenser mic to the side, and I'm going to close mic one of the speakers with a Shure SM57. I can change the loading side of the speakers without having to move the ribbon or the condenser mic, but the close mic is going to be difficult because I'm going to have to move it out of the way regardless, and that makes it difficult. How can I ensure that the microphone is in the exact same position as it was before? And that's where a little jig comes in handy I built for IR making. Some of you may have seen this before. This is my sweet spot finder that I use for making IRs and basically setting it to different positions throughout the IR making sweep process. And it's just a little concoction I made out of a large camera slider, some quick release plates, and another camera slider here. I can move the microphone from side to side on the large slider, and I've got a smaller slider at a 90-degree angle on top of that, with which I can modulate the distance. And I have a quick release plate on that so that I can just take off the mic real quickly. So what I can do is use the guide board I put on top there to place this in front of the cab, mark the position there. I can clamp this down and move this microphone to the position where I need it. You'll notice that there is, I don't know if you can see that, I hope you can. There's a scale on the side here, so I can actually move that to the position I want. For the closed mic, I'm going to do 2 recordings when it's front loaded. One with the mic in the exact same position to the cabinet, And then I'm going to back it off the exact distance that is the sum of the thickness of the baffle and the speaker frame. Because in the front-loaded configuration, the speaker obviously sits further forward in the cab. So I'm going to see if I can find out if the perceived differences just maybe are due to you being able to put the microphone closer to the speaker in a front-loading cab. One more thing before I get going, I want to give a great big shout out to Kreative Devices, who have been very helpful in endeavors like this. They hooked me up with a G16 notebook that really speeds up my work process. And I didn't have to sell my soul. I didn't have to do a dedicated video for Kreative Devices. All they wanted was a shout out here and there where it is relevant, where the laptop is pertinent. And this is one of those videos. Kagan at Kreative Devices told me if we creative people don't look out for each other, who will? And that really resonated with me. And if you're looking for a new computer or laptop, I highly suggest you check out Kreative Devices. They are so nice people and the products are really good. You're going to have a hard time finding a similar spec product at that price anywhere else. So support creative people like yourself. It's worth it financially, even if you are in the European Union with import taxes and stuff like that, like myself. So thanks very much to Kreative Devices. What I need to do next is take the speakers out here, make the cutouts larger, and I'll see you after I've done the sweeps and reamps. Nope, like always, I forgot a bunch of things. First of all, I did a thing. Look, I've cut and sanded these out larger so that the speakers fit in from the front and the back now. The problem before was if the cutout is too small, the speaker doesn't sit flush, and if you tighten the bolts down, you might bend your speaker. I've put the gaskets on the cab this time. To be honest, I don't really understand why we put them on the speakers usually. Why not put them on the front-loading cab? That way you can change out speakers more easily. But that's beside the fact right now. This jig has these little feet up here, and one of those bumps up against the cab here, so that way I can fix the jig in the same position when I change out the speakers. I'm going to be leaving the speaker grill off for this test. For one thing, I'd like to say it's an additional parameter I don't want to deal with, but the truth is the grill doesn't fit on when the speakers are front-loading. You see, the cutout is very close to the edge, and the grill just won't fit on. So as you see here, the material on the side of the grill is too thick to fit in there when there's a speaker mounted on the front. So I might be repeating myself here. The SM57 is going to go about there where the dust cap meets the cone, the sweet spot on the V30s. All the speakers are V30s that are going to go in here. I'm going to put a Beyerdynamic M160 pretty much here, pointing straight at the center of the cab so that it gets all four speakers maybe 1.5 meters, 1.20 meters or so away from the cab. And an Austrian Audio OC818, pretty much where I'm sitting right now, to simulate the sound that you would hear in the room when you're playing the cab. Usually you're not standing in front of the cab, you're kind of off to the side of it. But yeah, lastly, I'm going to be using my Lichtlaerm Audio Prometheus for this because I think it sounds awesome and I have it. And it has the preamp to feed function, so I don't have to replug everything when I do the room EQ wizard measurements. I'll just turn off the preamp after I've recorded the riffs and send the test signal through into the clean power amp. So yeah, the less I have to plug around, the less potential for error there is. And I think that's finally it. Let's get into it. Well, hello there. That was unexpectedly stressful. Changing out the speakers from rear loaded to front loaded in a tight space like that without bumping into any microphones or any other part of the test setup was a lot harder than I thought because I'm a clumsy idiot. I bump into things all the time. My phones always look like shit. All my guitars have dings, but I managed to do it without bumping into something. Unfortunately, I still lost the Austrian Audio OC818 room mic to the side of the cabinet, not because I'm a clumsy idiot, but because I made a rookie mistake. The boom arm of the mic stand was too long, or I didn't clamp it down tightly enough, because throughout the test, it just kind of drooped down. It fell down. You'll see it on the photos here. Yeah. But that in itself wasn't catastrophic enough for me to restart the test. I'd already done the rear loaded part because we have another room mic, the M160, the Beyerdynamic M160 pointing straight at the cab. So that's good enough for me. And what I did first after the test was look at the graphs, and that's what I want to start with too. As you can see here, this is Room EQ Wizard, and I'm just going to put in all the graphs that are interesting here. Those are 3 SM57 graphs, one for the front-loaded configuration, one for the rear-loaded configuration, and one for the front-loaded configuration where I backed off the mic about 24 millimeters to compensate for the distance of the baffle and the speaker frame that obviously came closer to the outside of the cab. Those are green, yellow, and blue. And in orange and red are the M160 room mic. And the first thing I noticed immediately is that the rear-loaded configuration seems to be more efficient. They are louder. I would have expected the front-loaded one to be a bit more upfront, but that does not seem to be the case. What I'm going to do first, because these high frequencies look very messy, is just smooth out all these graphs ever so slightly. Bear with me. So that looks much better. Let's untick the M160s. Let's look at the SM57s first. So green and blue are the front-loading configuration. Green is where the original mic was, and blue is backed off to the same relative position as it was in the rear-loading configuration, so 24 millimeters further away than the original mic position. And you can see those are very close. There's just a difference here in 5K a bit, but other than that, they very much follow the same frequency response. The rear-loaded configuration is a bit louder, but seems to follow the same frequency response until we get into the mids territory. So starting at about 1K, we see that some of the peaks and valleys shift a bit. Other peaks and valleys appear. This one here between at about 2.5K, that seems pretty extreme. But other than that, I don't see a huge difference. What we can do in Room EQ Wizard is, if I can remember where the action is, here under Actions, is we can align the sound pressure levels here. Boom. And that way, that gives us a better impression of the difference in actual frequency response. And we can see here still the rear-loaded configuration seems to be a bit louder. And there's a few differences in the mids, but other than that, it's not earth-shattering. Let's see how the room mic compares. So let's take in the M160 that is rear-loaded, and red is front-loaded. And we can see a very similar picture to the close mic situation with the SM57. We can see they follow pretty much the same frequency response up to about 1K. That's where it gets a little different. And let's align those SPLs as well. And yeah, not a huge difference. But of course, that's just the visual representation. We don't really know what these differences mean in a real-life context, meaning how does it sound? That's the most important thing. And to find out how they compare, I'm going to do an A-B-C listening session in Reaper now with the two riffs I reamped. I reamped a high-gain riff and a slightly less high-gain riff. And we're just going to switch back and forth between those while running Voxengo Span Plus that shows us real-time frequency responses here to see how those sounds, if we have any difference in sound at all, anything noticeable. So we're going to start off with just the SM57s first with the tracks the way they are. A is the front-loaded configuration. Button B is the front-loaded configuration with the microphone distance modulated, so pull back a bit so it has the same relative distance to the speaker as the rear-loaded configuration. I'm going to repeat that a few times in this video, I'm afraid. And C is the rear-loaded configuration. Let's just start off by comparing the two front-loaded mic positions. Okay, the sound isn't too different. The closer mic'd track, so the regular front-loaded one, sounds a little thicker to me, a little more saturated. I prefer that sound, but I generally like to have the SM57 as close to the speaker as I can get it, so that makes sense to me. I'm going to stick with that one. That was the blue graph, by the way. The green graph is the one with the distance modulated. Let's compare that one to the rear-loaded configuration. Let me just quickly mute and unmute the tracks. Okay, obviously the rear-loaded track is much louder as it was in the graphs that we saw in Room EQ Wizard. So that really makes it difficult to make a fair comparison. What I've done now is normalize the tracks and redone the test. Let's listen to the other riff because I was sick of hearing that riff. Reload it. Sounds different a bit, but still no real earth-shattering difference. Let's compare the rear-loaded configuration with the SM57 to the front-loaded configuration where I put the microphone to the same distance as to the... Oh, Jesus, this is confusing. So let's compare the rear-loaded configuration with the SM57 to the front-loaded configuration with the SM57, where I backed the microphone off so it would have the same distance to the speaker. There is a slight difference, but I dare not try to vocalize it because I'll only make a fool out of myself. I probably wouldn't notice a difference if I weren't actively listening to it, and that is quite surprising to me. Let's check out the room mics. So obviously I didn't modulate the distance for the room mics because they were supposed to kind of simulate the listening environment you would have when playing through your cab, and that wouldn't really make sense. You wouldn't change the distance you're standing to your cab, whether it's a rear or a front load cabinet. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So those room mics, unfortunately only one was left because the OC818 kind of dropped off on me, remained in the same position. Let's compare those to each other. Again, louder sounds better to me, but that really doesn't tell us a lot. So I normalized those tracks as well. Let's compare them normalized. The rear-loaded track seems to sound a little thicker to me, which is indicated by the graphs on screen. We can see there the low end is has a little higher sound pressure level in the rear-loaded, which is red here. Give it a look. But the difference is very minor. I didn't expect huge earth-shattering differences, but I did expect a more profound result than that because, to be honest, just moving the mic a millimeter or two would probably have a larger effect on the tone than the loading position in this Harley Benton cab. And with that said, of course, this test is anything but exhaustive. This is just anecdotal. This is one cab where I took the speakers from the rear side of the baffle and put them on the front side of the baffle, and I didn't get a huge result. There are potentially more parameters that could have an effect. One is internal volume. It's a fairly compact cab. And the other would be the spacing of the speakers to each other. If you take a look at the cab when it's in the front load configuration, excuse me, all the speakers are bunched up really close toward the center. I mean, the frames are almost touching. So potentially if I have a bigger cab, like my angle cab next to me here, where the speakers are spaced further apart, maybe the effect of the side to which the speakers are loaded is larger. But yeah, the grill could also play a role. There was no speaker grill on this one, so maybe, although I highly doubt that that has much of an effect, meaning the distance, if the distance between the microphone and the speaker is the same, and we just move the grill either closer to the mic or closer to the speaker, could that have an effect on filtering? I doubt it. Maybe I can't fully exclude it, but could be. To be really sure how different front and rear loaded cabs sound, one would have to try that on a few different cabs of different dimensions, different materials. With that in mind, I've been on the lookout for either a front-loaded Dietzel or a front-loaded Bogner cab for a while because I thought they'd probably sound more to my liking. Given my observations here, I'm probably inclined to also take rear-loaded cabs now if the price is right, because I don't really think the effect is that huge, even though it might have a larger magnitude than it did, order of magnitude than it did with the Harley Benton cab. I don't think it's going to be a night and day difference. So yeah, what do you think? Do you agree with my assessment, or am I a complete freaking idiot? Tell me in the comments down below. I'm probably going to go watch Christian Kohler's video now to see if he came up with a different result. I hope not. So yeah, if you want to support me, consider using my affiliate links down in the description below or become a patron of mine. But before you do that, consider supporting Room EQ Wizard, because that software is free, but they take donations. And that's the world I want to live in, where people share out of the goodness of their heart. And this is a super powerful tool. I've seen very expensive tools in my life as a test engineer that didn't have the capabilities that Room EQ Wizard has. And in the recent past, I've seen many guys on YouTube use this software for analysis, and I think it's fantastic. So if you have a few bob to spare, consider going to Room EQ Wizard's website and donating a bit to them, because they're awesome. Well, I hope you found this video interesting or entertaining, and I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video for speaker, amp, or more gizmo test videos. I don't know. There's many more to come. Thanks for watching again. Bye.